It was supposed to be just another busy morning for CEO Ethan Hayes. The boardroom was already full. Coffee cups steaming, assistants flipping through documents, and the buzz of the upcoming product launch humming in the background. Ethan walked in sharply dressed, confident, and focused. But something odd happened just before he took his seat. His assistant, Melanie, leaned toward him and whispered that the new junior analyst from the marketing team had just arrived and would be observing the meeting as part of her orientation. Ethan gave a casual nod. He had no time for introductions today. Time was money. The meeting began. Slides rolled. Voices discussed market strategies, but something unusual pulled his attention. At the far end of the table, the new intern sat quietly, observing the room with wide, nervous eyes. She looked young, probably mid-20s, with a composed demeanor, but what truly caught Ethan off guard wasn't her posture or her confidence. It was a small, crescent-shaped birthmark just visible on the side of her neck. It was the same shape, the same spot, the same size as the one Ethan himself had. It was so distinct that he'd only seen something remotely similar once in a dream, and yet there it was. He tried to brush it off. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he was imagining it. But the distraction grew. After the meeting, he called Melanie aside. "Who is she?" he asked casually, keeping his tone even. Melanie responded, "That's Mia Carter. She joined as a marketing intern from Boston. Bright, creative, scored highest in her assessments." Ethan paused. "Carter," he repeated. That name tugged something inside him. He couldn't place it, but it didn't feel random. It felt familiar. Later that day, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the company database, reading Mia's file. Nothing suspicious. No connections, no relatives in the company. Just an intern. But he kept looking, and then something odd popped out. Emergency contact. Amanda Carter. That name. Amanda, it rang louder now. A memory tried to surface. Ethan leaned back in his chair, lost in thought, tracing back years. Back before his suits and stocks, before boardrooms and business deals. Back to a dusty town in southern Idaho where he was born. He remembered growing up in foster care. He'd been separated from his parents at birth, or so he'd been told. No photos, no real history, just a birth certificate with the name Ethan James Hayes and a tiny mention of a Carter. In the caseworker notes, he'd spent most of his childhood bouncing between homes, never settling, never fully belonging. That crescent-shaped birthmark on his neck was always there. He'd asked about it once, and one foster parent joked, "Maybe you were kissed by the moon." He liked that, but now, the name Carter, the birthmark, the timing, it felt like too many coincidences, stacked on top of each other. Ethan didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he couldn't shake it off. He called HR and asked to schedule a one-on-one meeting with Mia, just to welcome her personally. Mia entered the room the next day with a polite smile. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for taking the time. I wasn't expecting to meet you so soon." Ethan smiled back, more kindly than usual. "Call me Ethan, you're Mia, right?" "Yes," she nodded. Mia Carter. He studied her for a moment, her face, her eyes, the birthmark. She looked familiar in a way he couldn't explain. "Tell me about yourself," he asked. Well, she began, "I was raised in Boston. I lost my mother when I was little. I don't remember much about her. I was adopted when I was 6. My adoptive mother, Amanda Carter, is the only parent I've ever really known." Ethan felt a chill. Adopted Amanda Carter. He stayed calm. "Did you ever try to find your biological family?" Mia hesitated. "A few times, but the records were sealed. All I know is that I was born in Idaho. There's a note that my birth family might have had the name Hayes. But I never got more than that." Ethan blinked. Idaho. Carter Hayes. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This girl, this young woman, she could be related to him. Could she be his sister? He didn't say anything then. He thanked her for the meeting and let her go. But the moment the door closed, Ethan sat frozen, staring into space. His past, something he'd buried so deep under his corporate empire, was rising again, and it had a face. Now that night, he went home and pulled out the old box from the back of his closet, the one with childhood records, scraps from foster care, the few documents he'd managed to retrieve when he turned 18. He read through every paper. There it was again, mother's name, Amanda Carter. But it wasn't the adoptive mother. It was his birth mother, her full name, Amanda Elise Carter. Now, it all made sense. Amanda Carter had given birth to him, and possibly, later, to Mia. Ethan realized, with a jolt, Mia wasn't just some intern. She was likely his biological sister. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he requested a private DNA test. Discreet. He made sure HR would reach out to MIA and offer her a company wellness perk, a free ancestry and health screening test. She accepted, not knowing anything unusual. A week passed. Ethan checked the lab result the moment it came through. There it was, a 99.9% sibling match. Half-siblings. Mia Carter was his sister. Ethan stared at the report, hands trembling slightly. He wasn't a man who cried easily. Life had hardened him. But a tear rolled down his cheek. Decades of loneliness, of wondering if he had family somewhere, of feeling like he was born alone into the world. And now, he had a sister, and she had been sitting just 10 feet away from him in the same boardroom. But what now? He couldn't just walk into her office and say, "Hi, surprise, I'm your brother." That would shake her to the core. He needed to handle it gently, thoughtfully. He consulted with a friend, an old college buddy who was now a therapist, and explained the situation. His friend advised him to talk to Mia slowly, reveal what he'd learned, and let her process it on her own terms. So Ethan waited a day, then another. Finally, he sent Mia a message. "I'd like to speak with you again, if you're free." They met in his office once more. This time, Ethan was less composed. He didn't start with small talk. "Mia," he said gently, "I need to share something important with you, something personal." She looked concerned, sitting across from him. "You mentioned in our last talk that you were adopted, that your records listed the name Hayes." She nodded slowly. "I think we're related," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "I think you're my sister." She stared at him in disbelief. "I've done the research. I've seen your file. I saw your birthmark. I recognized the name Carter, and I had a DNA test done." Mia's eyes widened. "You tested me. I needed to know." Ethan said, "I'm sorry if that was invasive, but when I saw you, something clicked. I grew up in Idaho, in foster care. My mother's name was Amanda Carter, and according to this report," he held up the papers, "we're siblings, half, maybe, but real." Mia sat in stunned silence. For a moment, nothing moved, nothing breathed, and then she spoke. "My birth mother's name was Amanda too, but I never knew anything about her. Just her name, on a sealed record." Ethan handed her the document. She read it slowly, hands shaking. When she looked up, her eyes were glassy. "I always wondered," she whispered, "if I had someone, anyone. I used to imagine a brother." Ethan stood, walked around the desk, and sat beside her. "I used to imagine a sister," he said softly. She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. They sat there, in the quiet, connected not by business, but by blood, by the past, and by the miracle that, in a world so wide, two lost pieces of the same family found their way back to each other in the most unexpected place. After that emotional conversation, neither of them could go back to their day as usual. Mia was excused from her meetings that afternoon, and Ethan canceled the rest of his appointments without explanation. He sat alone in his office, gazing out at the skyline, trying to process everything. In a single week, his world had shifted. From CEO to brother. From lonely to found. He never imagined that the past would resurface so unexpectedly. For years, he had built his identity around independence, no roots, no family, just sheer grit and ambition. He worked his way out of the foster system, survived setbacks, climbed the ladder, and built an empire. But no amount of success had ever truly filled the quiet ache he carried inside, the feeling of not belonging to anyone. That hollow space had always been there, even if he never spoke of it. And now, Mia had stepped into that space like a missing puzzle piece. Her presence answered unspoken questions, and at the same time, it opened new ones. Who had Amanda Carter really been? Why had both children ended up separated, adopted, raised by strangers? Why had no one told them? Were there others? Was there more family they didn't know about? Meanwhile, Mia sat quietly on the rooftop terrace above the marketing floor, hugging her knees to her chest. She felt a strange weight pressing on her chest. Not pain, exactly, but a heavy kind of awe. Her whole life, she'd assumed she was alone. She had loving adoptive parents, yes, but something was always missing. There were moments growing up where she'd stare in the mirror, tracing that crescent-shaped birthmark and whispering to herself, "Maybe I have a brother somewhere." Now, that childhood whisper had become a loud truth. Ethan Hayes, the man whose name was printed on the building she worked in, the man people rarely saw except in headlines and shareholder meetings, was her brother. Not just a boss. Not just a CEO. Family. She wasn't sure what to feel. Gratitude, shock, joy, fear. It felt like all of them at once. That evening, Ethan invited her to dinner, not at a high-end restaurant, but somewhere quiet, personal, away from the public. They met at a small Italian cafe tucked into a corner of the city. The waiter knew Ethan by name and treated them like regulars. Ethan usually dined alone when he came here, preferring silence over spotlight. Tonight was different. They talked, slowly at first, about their lives, about the tiny pieces of history they each had. Ethan told her about his early childhood, moving through 5 foster homes before the age of 10. Spending holidays alone, fighting hard to get into college. Mia shared her life with Amanda, her adoptive mother, a kind, soft-spoken woman who had always encouraged her to pursue art and marketing. As they spoke, their stories began to overlap in strange ways. Both loved classical music. Both had a habit of writing in notebooks late at night. Both were terrible at cooking and lived mostly off coffee and takeout. They laughed over these silly similarities. But under the laughter was something much deeper. Recognition. Connection. And then, Ethan asked a question that had been sitting on his mind all day. Do you know anything else about Amanda Carter? Your birth mother, I mean. Mia shook her head. No, just that she was young when she gave birth. She had some health problems. I think she passed away not long after I was born. That's what the adoption agency said. Ethan nodded slowly. I was told she left me at a hospital. No note, no explanation. Just left. Mia's eyes dropped. Do you think she wanted us? I've wondered that my whole life, Ethan said, staring at his coffee cup. But maybe it wasn't about wanting. Maybe it was about survival. Maybe she couldn't raise us. Maybe the world failed her before she could even try. That silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. They decided, that night, to search together, not for blame, but for truth. For the full story of Amanda Carter. And maybe, just maybe, for answers neither had dared to seek before. Over the next few weeks, their relationship evolved. At the office, Ethan maintained his role as CEO, and Mia respected the professional boundaries. But in private, they were slowly becoming siblings. They began spending time together on weekends, visiting the places Ethan remembered from childhood, looking through public records, court documents, anything that might help them trace Amanda's life. One day, Mia brought a faded photo album she'd found buried in a storage box from Amanda's house, the one thing she hadn't gone through since her adoptive mom passed away. Inside were photos she didn't recognize. Most were old, worn, edges curled, some with no labels. But one photo made Ethan stop breathing. It showed a woman, probably in her early 20s, holding a newborn baby. The woman had gentle eyes, long hair pulled into a braid, and a tired but peaceful smile. Ethan felt a jolt in his heart. He knew that face, even if only in fragments. That's her, he whispered. That's Amanda. Mia nodded. And that baby. He pointed to the faint handwriting on the back of the photo. Ethan, throat tightened. A photo of him, held by his mother, something he never thought he'd see. There were more photos. Amanda with a small group of people. Amanda in a hospital gown. Amanda sitting near a window, reading a book, visibly pregnant. Mia. The photos painted a quiet, hidden story of a woman who had struggled. A woman who had tried. A woman who maybe had no choice but to let her children go. But not because she didn't love them. The next big discovery came from an unexpected place. Mia, a marketing genius in the making, decided to dig through digital archives, not just paper records. She found a name, Jonathan Carter, tied to Amanda's hospital file, a brother, a cousin. They found a phone number, took a chance, called it. A gruff voice answered. Ethan introduced himself gently, explained they were looking for someone who might have known Amanda Carter from years ago. There was a pause. I'm her brother. The voice said. Jonathan was Amanda's younger brother, their uncle. He agreed to meet them the next weekend. When they arrived at his modest home in the countryside. He stood on the porch, clearly emotional. He hugged both Ethan and Mia with trembling arms. For him, it was like ghosts had come to life. I always wondered what happened to you, he said softly. Amanda. She was my big sister. She was good. Too good for what life gave her. He told them everything. Amanda had grown up poor. No parents, just him and her. She had Ethan when she was barely 19. Alone, no support. She tried to raise him but couldn't hold on. She was sick, overwhelmed, and eventually made the painful decision to place him in care. Years later, she got pregnant again with Mia, but by then, her health had worsened. She passed away shortly after giving birth. Jonathan had tried to take Mia in, but the system moved too fast. He lost track of where she was placed. I never stopped thinking about either of you, he said. Never stopped praying. They sat for hours, looking at old photos, listening to stories about Amanda, how she used to sing to them, how she had a laugh that filled a room, how she loved poetry and the stars. That night, Ethan and Mia sat in the car in silence, both overwhelmed. I think, Mia finally whispered. We found what we were looking for. Ethan nodded. Not just answers, but her. They had lost a mother, but through that loss, they'd found each other. The past was no longer a blank page. They had a story now, and it was just beginning. The weeks after meeting Jonathan brought a different kind of energy into Ethan's life. It was as though a fog had lifted, revealing a part of himself he didn't know had been hidden. Every morning now, he wasn't just focused on quarterly goals or board meetings. He was texting Mia, sharing old photos, remembering, laughing, and slowly healing. For Mia, it was like walking into a world she never knew she needed. Her bond with Ethan became more than just emotional, it gave her a deeper sense of identity. The pieces of her life that always felt unconnected were beginning to align. She now knew who her mother was, had met an uncle she never dreamed of finding, and had a brother who, despite all odds, was not only alive but deeply protective of her. One Friday evening, Mia was invited to Ethan's home for dinner. But this wasn't just any dinner. Ethan had something planned. Not a surprise in the dramatic sense, but something symbolic. As Mia walked into the spacious penthouse apartment, she noticed the change immediately. A large picture frame now hung in the entryway, a photo of Amanda Carter, taken from the old album, newly restored and printed. Below it, a small plaque. The mother who gave us life and strength, even in silence. Mia froze. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at the photo, then back at Ethan, who simply said, "She deserves a place here." With us, they ate quietly that night, not out of awkwardness, but out of peace. For the first time in a long time, they both felt like they weren't alone. Like the ground beneath them was finally steady. After dinner, Ethan handed Mia a folder. Inside it were two things: a letter from the attorney confirming a trust fund had been established in her name, and an official update to the company directory. Mia Carter listed as Director of Brand Development. Mia stared at the papers in disbelief. "Ethan, I can't accept this. I haven't earned it." He smiled. "You've earned everything. You're brilliant, and you have vision. But more than that, your family. I don't want you working under me as a random employee. I want you building this with me." She didn't respond at first. She looked down at her hands, then back up. "Are you sure people won't say I'm just here because I'm your sister?" "They will," Ethan said with a shrug. "But the people who matter will know better. And I don't care about noise. I care about legacy." That word stuck with her. Legacy. Something Amanda never got to leave behind. But now, maybe she could through them. Mia accepted the offer. Not out of obligation, but because she believed in what Ethan was building, and because for the first time, she believed in herself. Their bond grew stronger over the following months. They celebrated holidays together. Ethan introduced her to his small circle of close friends, most of whom were shocked to learn he even had a sibling. But the warmth Mia brought into his life was undeniable. He smiled more, worked a little less, and began opening up about parts of his past he had long buried. But then, just as things were settling into something beautiful, a new thread of the past surfaced, one that neither of them was prepared for. It began with a letter, delivered to Ethan's office. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence: Amanda didn't just have 2 children. Along with it was a faded hospital discharge paper showing Amanda Carter as the mother of a baby boy born 3 years after Mia. No name was listed for the child, just Infant Carter. Ethan's hand shook as he read it. He immediately showed Mia, who went pale. Another sibling, it seemed impossible, and yet, it made sense. Amanda had disappeared after giving Mia up. Maybe she had another child. Maybe that child was lost in the system, just like them. The mystery consumed them. Together, they contacted Jonathan again, but he was just as surprised. "I thought she'd passed away, not long after Mia's birth," he said, confused. "I didn't even know there was another." Ethan hired a private investigator, one of the best. In 4 weeks, nothing surfaced, until one day, they got a call. The investigator had traced a boy named Lucas, adopted in the same county, born 3 years after Mia. His birth mother, listed as a Carter, no middle name. But the signature on the paperwork matched Amanda's known handwriting. Lucas had been raised in several foster homes and had gone through tough years, eventually ending up in a rehabilitation program. In his 20s, he was currently living in Oregon, working part-time at a mechanic shop, trying to rebuild his life. Ethan flew there the next morning. He didn't tell Mia, not yet. He needed to see for himself. When he arrived at the auto shop, he saw him. A man in his late 20s, tall, lean, covered in grease and tattoos. But there it was, that same birthmark. The crescent on the left side of his neck. Ethan nearly forgot how to breathe. He walked in slowly and introduced himself. "Lucas." The young man nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yeah, you need something." "My name's Ethan Hayes. I think we're brothers." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "What?" Ethan explained. The adoption records, the DNA test he had done, the birthmark, the mother's name. At first, Lucas didn't believe it. He was skeptical. He had grown up with nothing. No family, no real love, just survival. But then, Ethan showed him the photo. Amanda holding baby Ethan. Lucas stared at it for a long time. "I think I've seen her in my dreams," he said quietly. "But I didn't know she was real." They talked for hours. Lucas had never known anything about his origins. He'd battled addiction, homelessness, anger issues, but now, he had answers. And possibly, a family. Ethan offered to fly him back with him. Lucas hesitated. "I don't fit into your world," he said. "I'm just broken." Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. "We all were. That's why we need each other." 2 days later, Ethan returned with Lucas. Mia was waiting at the apartment. When she saw them walk in, her eyes filled with tears. Lucas looked between them. "So, you're really my siblings." Mia nodded. "We're..." And then, without another word, she stepped forward and hugged him. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because something inside her said, "This is right." Ethan joined them, and for the first time in all 3 of their lives, they stood together, not as strangers bound by blood, but as siblings bound by fate. Their story wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning, and for the first time, they weren't walking alone anymore. Life moved differently after that moment. The apartment that once echoed with silence now held voices, laughter, and conversations that stretched into the night. Ethan, Mia, and Lucas began sharing space not just physically, but emotionally, slowly weaving a sibling bond that had been missing their entire lives. Ethan, still CEO by title and discipline, started stepping back from his usual rigidity. He made more time for dinners, less time for endless strategy meetings. Not that he abandoned the company, but he started trusting others to help lead, especially Mia, who was blossoming in her role. Her ideas were bold but rooted in purpose. Under her direction, the company's public image started shifting, warmer, more human. She used real stories, compassion, authenticity, the kind of storytelling the world was starving for. Lucas, too, was changing. In those early days, he was quiet, cautious, even a little distant. He kept his bag packed for weeks, not entirely sure if he would stay. He didn't know how to be in a family. He didn't know if he deserved one. But Ethan was patient, and Mia never gave up on making him feel included. They cooked together sometimes, or at least tried. Ethan's pasta burned more often than not. Mia once mistook salt for sugar, and Lucas seemed to survive solely on black coffee. But somehow, these imperfect evenings became their most perfect moments. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Lucas sat on the balcony with Ethan. The city lights blinked below them, like silent stars. "Why do you do this?" Lucas asked. "Do what?" Ethan replied. "Treat me like I belong here, like I'm part of this. You're rich, you're polished. And me, I've been in and out of jail. I've messed up so many times, I stopped counting." Ethan leaned back. "You didn't mess up, Lucas. Life did. You just survived it." Lucas looked down. "I don't want to mess this up." "You won't," Ethan said, "because now you're not alone." It was the kind of reassurance that didn't need more words. The next few weeks, Ethan helped Lucas enroll in a vocational course to become a certified mechanic. Lucas was already skilled, but getting licensed would open new doors. For the first time, he was excited about something. He started working at a small garage Ethan quietly invested in, not out of charity, but to give Lucas something of his own, something real. Meanwhile, Mia spearheaded a new social initiative for the company, a project focused on foster care support and youth empowerment. She shared her own story in a heartfelt blog post that went viral. People connected, employees were inspired, donors came forward. The board was impressed, but Ethan was simply proud, not as a CEO, but as a brother. During a company gala held months later, Ethan did something he had never done before. He walked on stage, took the mic, and shared his story publicly. "I built this company from nothing," he began, "but I wasn't truly complete until I found something I didn't even know I was missing: my family." The crowd listened in silence. "My sister Mia and my brother, Lucas, we were separated by the system, raised by strangers, and reunited by fate. And now, we're building more than a business. We're building a legacy of healing, truth, and second chances." The room erupted in applause. But for Ethan, the only thing that mattered was the look on Mia's face, and the quiet tear Lucas quickly wiped away. After the gala, the three of them stood outside, watching the city breathe. "You know," Mia said, "sometimes I wonder if Mom knew, if she believed, even for a second, that somehow we'd find each other again." "She did," Ethan replied. "How do you know?" Lucas asked. Ethan smiled softly. "Because she gave all three of us the same mark, same place, same shape. That wasn't random. That was her sign." They were quiet for a long moment, each thinking of Amanda, of what she must have gone through, of the silent courage she had to carry 3 lives within her, even if she couldn't raise them. That night, Lucas surprised them with a framed sketch he had drawn himself. He wasn't a professional artist, but it came from the heart. The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a night sky, each with a tiny crescent moon on their necks. At the top, he'd written, "From broken to bonded." It now hangs in Ethan's apartment, beside Amanda's photo. The bond between the siblings wasn't perfect. They still had moments of tension. Lucas sometimes pulled away when things got too emotional. Mia occasionally questioned if she was doing enough. Ethan wrestled with the pressure of protecting both of them, but they always came back together. That summer, they took a trip to Idaho, the place where it all began. They visited the hospital. Ethan was born in the courthouse where their files were once stamped, and the park Amanda had written about. In one of her old letters found in Jonathan's attic, they sat on the old swings, watching the sky shift colors. "This feels like closure," Mia said. "No," Ethan said. "This feels like beginning." Back home, they established the Carter Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting youth aging out of the foster system. Scholarships, housing aid, mental health support. It became more than a project. It became their mission. Lucas ran workshops for young men who had walked similar roads. Mia handled branding and outreach. Ethan used his platform to fundraise, network, and expand. What started as a coincidence, a birthmark in a boardroom, became the anchor of something beautiful. Years passed, their bond only grew stronger. Lucas started his own garage. Mia became the CMO of the company. Ethan slowly stepped down as CEO and took on more advisory and mentoring roles. But every month, Without fail, the three of them met over dinner, over laughs, over memories. And that never changed. People often asked Ethan what his greatest achievement was. He no longer said the company. He said, finding my family, and never letting go.